Okay, good evening. Hope everyone is doing well. Tonight we'll be learning Maseches Pesachim, Daf Kuf Yud Gimel. We are starting about 2/3, 3/4 of the way down on Kuf Yud Beis, Amud Beis. And we're starting with the words Shlosha Dvarim Tziva Rabbi Yossi. It's about 8 or 9 lines down in the wide lines. In the old school Tzura Sadaf, the first word on the line is V'huchzak. We said V'huchzak Me'ein Mayan Pasuach Dil Mamash Chaziva. So we're going to be learning a lot about what the Chachamim gave as guidance to either their Talmidim or to people around them, their children, whatever the case may be. We have a lot of ground to cover, so I'll try to move at a reasonable pace. Shlosha dvarim tziva Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, es Rabbi, al tetzi yechida b'layla. You're not allowed to go out alone at night. B'al tamam bifnei haner arum. One cannot stand undressed in front of a candle. B'al tikanis emerchatz chadash shema tipaches. You cannot go into a new bathhouse because it may break down. The building may collapse. Ad kama amr b'shir ben Levi ayud beis chodesh for the first 12 months. Why this versus any other building? So if you've ever done any of these archaeological tours, you'll see that the way that they built bathhouses was that there was a big open space under the floorboards. They would boil water underneath, and the floor would get hot, and the room would get hot, and everyone would sweat. That's kind of the way that it was built. So the floors were not as well built as it would be in a house. That's why there was more concern there. Next, one should not be undressed in front of a candle. The Tanya, because the Brisa writes, this Gemara says that in a Brisa that a person who's undressed in front of a candle, it can bring about epilepsy. If a couple is intimate le'or haner in a room that has light in it, as well, if that is a tashma shamita that leads to conception, then that too can lead to children who have epilepsy. If a couple is intimate while they have a young child, a baby that is sleeping on that same bed that the couple is in, then also tinok nichbed, and that child can be, God forbid, they could have some form of epilepsy. Below amran elo de lahabe barshata. That's only true if he's not yet a year old. Lahabe barshata leslan, but if he's already a year old, then there's no problem at all. Below amran elo de gani lehadekari. That's only true if he's sleeping by the feet of the bed. That's if the baby is resting by the feet of the bed. Aval de gani lehade reishi. But if the baby is sleeping at the top of the bed where the pillows go, so leslan ba. We know, of course, in Shulchan Aruch, you're supposed to have your bed supposed to be north south. All these shilas in the post game. What's the right way to orient your beds? Okay, not for now. It's only true when the baby is not touched at any point. But if the baby is touched at some point, then there's no problem at all. We said, 10 lines from the bottom, Kuf Yud Beis Amud Beis, that a person should not go out alone at night to Tanya, because the Brisa writes, one should not go out at night, not on Tuesday nights and not on Friday nights. She'igris bas machlas. This is the name of a female shade. She'igris bas machlas. That's a night when she's present. Ushmona esrei ribo, and a very large number. Ushmona esrei ribo. Shal malache chabala yotzin. They're all out and about on those nights, Tuesday nights and Friday nights. So that's what the Gemara says, that you're not supposed to go out that night. On those 2 nights, it used to be that these types of shadim were not only out Tuesday nights and Friday nights, they were out all the time. But one time, Paga Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, this Igris Bas Machlas, bumped into Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. Amrale, she, the demoness, is that a word? I don't know. The female demon said to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, Ilav de Michrazan Allah Barakia. If they didn't announce about you, Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, up in Shamayim, quote, Hizaharu b'chaninu u'v'toraso. Be careful, don't bug him. He's a big Talmid Chacham. Don't mess with Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, and don't mess with his Torah. Sikantich, I would have put your life in danger. Amar Allah, Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa doesn't need our approbation. He was a very smart, knowledgeable person who had the Chachmas HaTorah. So he quickly bites back. Amar Allah, he says to Igros Bas Machlas, if I'm such a chashiv guy upstairs, well, I'm going to use my power to get you out of the way. Gozer ani alayich shelo ta'avor b'yishuv la'olam. Sorry, you're out. You're fired. Goodbye. You no longer have a role as Igros Bas Machlas, as a demon. So she says back, come on, Amar li b'matusa minach. This is a phrase we've seen in Shas before. Please, I beg of you, shavak li rav chapur, to leave me a little bit of space to do my work. And Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, for reasons that we will not see in the Gemara, you have to see the Rishonim, the Maharals, and the different Mari Makomos here to understand what is going on here on the level way deeper than the one we're reading here. Shavak la, he left for her leili shabasos v'leili revi'ios. He said, fine, on all nights of the week, you're not allowed, except for Tuesday nights and Friday nights when you are allowed. So some of the Meforshim point out, because those nights were the least frequent for travel, Friday night, obviously, Tuesday night was the dead middle of the week, so it was just less likely for people to travel. And the Meforshim go through and explain, because Wednesday people were traveling to cities that had a Batei Din for Thursday Batei Din, because the Batei Din met on the days when Kriyas Torah was done. So a whole deal, and you get into every day of the week. Sunday they were traveling for Monday, Tuesday they didn't travel, Wednesday they were traveling for Thursday, and by the time you got to Friday, you were going to go for Shabbos. But so Friday nights and Tuesday nights were the quietest nights of the week, and that's why he gave her those nights. 3 lines from the bottom, the Sucha the Zimna. Another time, Paga Be Be'abaye. The Igris Bas Machlas bumped into Abaye. Amrale, she said to him, had they not spoken about you in Shamayim, Abaye, she said to him, had they not said about you, quote, 2 lines from the bottom, Hizaru ben Achmeni, famous, we know this, that Abaye had a couple of names. He was raised by Rabbi Bar Nachmeni. It was a little hard to tell. Was his name Nachmeni? Was his name Abaye? Av Hashem, we've spoken about this a number of times. Hizaru ben Achmeni uvesoraso. So in Shamayim, this shade, Igros Bas Machla, she heard that he was a special guy, so you're not supposed to mess around. So then, Hava Sakanticha would have endangered you. So then, Omar Lei, Ichashivna Birakia, Gozrani Alaichi, Shalot Tavar Bishuv Olam. So here, she doesn't bite back, because there's not much left to say. And as it turns out, according to some Meforshim, therefore, we don't have to worry about these nights as we travel, because by Rabbi Chanina ben Dos, Rabbi Chanina Gedosa gave a dispensation that you can show up on Tuesday nights and on Friday nights. But Abaye didn't seem to do that. So asks the Gemara last line, Hakal Chazina de Avra. We know already that people do have these problems on those nights. We see that there are problems. So answers the Gemara as we turn to the top of Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Amrei Hani Gazyasa Ninhu Deshamte Susya Va'asu Dovre Lehu. There were these pathways that the demons used to use, and their horses would run through the pathways, and they'd have to go back into the city through these pathways to get the horses. So that the only time after Abaye's conversation with Igros Bas Machlas, the only time that there was a problem was when the horses of the demons ran back into the city, and they would go get their own horses. Again, this is all homily. This is all very, very deep Torah, but that is what the Gemara says here. Okay, let's continue. We're on the top of Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Omar le Rab the Rab Asi lo tadur b'mata de lo tzanif basusya. Don't live in a city where horses don't make the sounds that they normally make. V'lo nabach b'kalva, in a place where dogs don't bark. V'al tadur be'ir dereish mata asya. And don't live in a city where the leader of the city is a doctor. V'lo tinse bitarte, one should not marry 2 women. But if you are going to marry more than one, I nisabas tarte nisiv tlas. And if you're going to marry 2, it's better to marry 3 women than it is to marry 2, because the Gemara's assumption here, based on the Meforshim, is that if a man is married to 2 women, so then if there's ever like a big fight, it's always going to be 2 against 1. But the assumption is that if there's 3 wives, that at least one of them will be on your side. Very interesting Gemara. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. It doesn't make a difference because of Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom that in our communities we don't allow for people to marry 2 wives. Though there are communities around the world where it is allowed. And we know from Tanakh that the second wife is referred to as a tzira, the second wife is referred to as a tzira, that she's referred to as the one who causes me pain. Amar le Rav Kahana, hafoch benevelta. It's no problem if you want to take an animal and flip it around and go here, go there, take the animal and change its direction, no problem. But when you talk, the words that come out of your mouth, those you can't mess around with. You have to make sure that you say what you mean and you mean what you say, and you can't. That's going to be your currency with others, is to make sure that your words are clear. Pshot nevelta b'shuka ushkil agra. You should also be willing to do a job, one as simple as skinning an animal in the shuk in order to get a salary. One should not have a busha to have a job that even in their mind is beneath them. V'lotema, don't say kahana ana. My name is Rav Kahana. V'gavra Rabba ana. I'm so great. V'sanya b'milsa. This is the kind of work that I hate. This is beneath me. It is not the right way to do it. Salakta le'igra sherusach b'hadach. When one goes up to the roof, not that far away, you should bring some food with you. Sherusach b'hadach. Bring that which will serve you. Bring some food with you. Mea kare b'mata bezuza. This would even be true if you can get 100 gourds for a zuz. Even if food is super cheap, you could easily pick it up in the marketplace. Still, always bring food with you wherever you go. And your food should be hidden under the corners of your clothing. Under the corners, nehevu. That's where your food should be. Keep it in your pockets, basically. Continues the Gemara. We're about a third of the way down. Amar le, a little bit less. Amar le Rav the Rav Chia bere lo tishtei sama. Do not drink drugs. So the Meforshim are explaining that we're talking about even drugs that are regular routine drugs, not even things that are necessarily dangerous or addictive, but you should try not to have an emotional dependency on these things as well. If you can avoid taking the medication, you should avoid taking the medication. Below tishvar nigra, you should not jump over a stream. Below tak or kaka, one should not remove a tooth unless it's, of course, absolutely required. But often tooth pain can go away. So we know we have a lot more science nowadays. We can take an x-ray, we can have a dentist's exam, we can see that there's a cavity, we can see that the root is dead. We have so much more technology. So this Gemara is not saying, what? We have film, we have x-ray, yeah, you can see what's going on. You'll know exactly. If the dentist, you'll see everything and then you're done. You can just decide. And as well, and I would imagine that this is not one of the things that needs to be taught, but we live in a strange culture. Don't provoke snakes. It's not a good idea. One should also not provoke an Aramean to make sure that we don't cause for problems with other nations.
By snakes, I mean Democrats.
How am I supposed to respond to that? I don't even know what I'm supposed to say right now. Tonu Rabbanan, the rabbis have taught us. Shlosha ein miskanen bohen. Gosh. There are three groups that you should not provoke. Let's see if yours makes the list, Yehuda. The Elu Hain, Nachri Katan, the Nachash Katan, the Talmud Katan. To a young person of the other nations, the Nachash Katan, a small snake, the Talmud Katan, all of them have long memories. My taima, the Malchusaihu Achore Udnaihu Koy. This is like a colloquialism that their Malchus, their leadership is behind their ears. In other words, it's in the future, it's down the road. Why ears? And some of the Meforshim speak that out. The point is that they have long memories. Children, when they're mistreated as children and you're the one who mistreated them, they hold the memory. They remember it for forever, usually. So that's what the Gemara says. The Malchusayu Achore Udnaihu Koy. And the Gemara continues. Amar le Rav le'ayvu b'rei. Rav says to his son, tough conversation to have with a child. Tarchivach b'shmaita. I tried to teach you a lot of Torah. V'lo mistaya milsa. And I wasn't successful in doing so. So you got to go get a job. Not everyone's fit to sit in kollel all day. You got to go get a job. So says Rav to his son, Ta agmarach mile de alma. I'm going to teach you the ways of the world. Adachala akarech zevinon zabe. When the sand is still on your feet, you should sell your goods. Namely, if you go out and you buy merchandise, you should sell it right away. Don't keep stock. You got to sell it right away. Anything in general, when you sell, you may have some regrets when you sell it because the market could change right after you sell it. Your profit margins can go down. The value of the dollar can fluctuate. So many things can change. So on anything, it's normal to have some type of regret. However, bar mechamra dezabin velo sicharet. But when it comes to wine, whatever it is, you have to sell it when you get it because it goes bad very quickly. Now, we also know now that we have wines that have aged for many years. We've probably got a much more masterful technique with the fermenting process. We've got it down to a rigid, clear science. Our wines, when they're kept properly and they're in a sealed barrel or in a cork bottle, can last for years. And that's totally fine. But their wines were not like that. Their wines could go bad pretty quickly. And we know that they could be mischametz, they could turn into vinegar. So therefore, bar mechamra dezamim v'lo sicharet, even if the price went up tomorrow, who's to say your wine would have been good tomorrow? So don't have any regrets when you are getting rid of your wine. Shri kisayich pesach sakayich. First, open the cash register to get paid, and then give over your product. Don't give the product and then expect the person to pay. First, you should collect your funds. It's better to work closer to the ground for one unit, for a kav, than it is to work on the roof for a kur, which is 180 times larger. The Meforshim here explain, lav dafka, floor versus roof. Maybe it's close to home versus far from home. Your profit margins have to make sense. They have to make sense in regards to how far you have to travel. I spoke to someone today there. They spend their they leave early Monday morning, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all day. I think until Thursday too. They're in another state, in another city, being a doctor, and then they come home for the next few days of the week. So that's very difficult. It's not a judgment, it's just very difficult. So I don't know how this would play in with that. Is that appropriate? Yeah, maybe, yes, no, maybe, I don't know. So that's what the Gemara says here, is that it's better to have 180th of what you could have made if you are then close to home. Tamra bechaluzach lebeis sudna rahid. If you get a significant amount of dates in the basket, the dates, the fruit of dates, then those were used to make beer. You should go straight to the sudna. The sudna is a beer maker. Rahit, you should run there. So says the Gemara, ve'ad kama how much is considered an amount where you should all of a sudden run there. Now, Amar Rava ad tlasa sa'a, even for as little as 3 saw. That is the appropriate amount, and that's because these dates are going to be great for making beer, and beer is a drink that everybody drinks. So you're going to have a good profit margin. It's a good business model. Remember, Rav is giving Ivo some business techniques. Amar Rav Papa, ilo diramoy shichra lo iasri. If not for the fact that I was a beer brewer, I would never have become rich. In Ika de Amre, it wasn't him, but it was rather Rav Chizda. Amar Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda says, ilo diramoy shichra lo iasri. That had it not been that I was a beer brewer, so then I would not have become rich. My sudna, what does the word sudna mean? We said it means a beer brewer. Answers the Gemara with a fascinating answer. Amar Rav Chizda, sod na'eh ugmilus chasadim. It's a wonderful secret and it enables gmilus chasadim. What does that mean? It means that it's a profitable business to be a beer brewer. And then once you make all of the proceeds, you can help people with your money. So the Sefer HaChinuch writes this, that people are, we have to live not within our means of what we make in our check. For those of us who make exorbitant amounts of money, or even more than we need is probably a better way to say it. If we make more than we need, so the extra, the Sefer HaChinuch speaks about this, goes to others. That wasn't meant for us. It was meant for others. So that's not just meiser. Sometimes you have to give more. And we know how that one should not give more than 20%. But even there are coolest to that as well. Individuals versus organizations. These are shilas in the poskim. It's like they say about Warren Buffett all the time that he's going to be giving away like 99% of his wealth. Okay, so that's the hashkafa, at least, of helping others to make sure that which is really extra for you after you've taken care of your needs should go to others, a very, very high level. Not one that I'm familiar with, but it's a very high level. So that's what sodna gmilas chasad means. That's why sudna. The beer business is a good business because it enables that person to do gmilas chasadim. More. Amar Rav Papa, kol agav gevia ba'e. Every time you have an invoice out, you need to collect on it. Kol ashray safek asi safek lo asi. If something was sold on credit, so then safek asi, we're not sure if the money is going to come in. Safek if the money will come in. Safek if the money will be lo asi, that it will not come in. Ude asi, and even when it does, maybe they'll pay you with garbage coins. Our currency system is not built like this necessarily. Unless I guess if somebody paid you $1 million in pennies, I guess that would be an equivalent of what the Gemara is talking about. If they give you a garbage coin, they may pay you with bad coins. Okay, so that's what the Gemara says here, that credit is not as simple. Of course, we know that things are very, very different now with technology, because if you as an organization, so let's say I work for the OU, if somebody swipes a credit card to the OU, yes, as it relates to the person, it's credit. As it relates to us, it's money in the bank. So it's totally... Right, the mindset is different. The lending part is not on our end, where we were the recipients. We got paid. So the family who makes the donation, they have credit, outstanding credit that they have to pay a bill for. That's between them and the Visa company and Chase, whoever it is. But for me, for the OU, for whoever, for the organization, that money cleared already. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a real credit. We tell someone, I trust you to pay me back in a few weeks. That's what we're talking about. Shlosha dvarim, Amar Rav Yochanan, Mishum Anshe Yerushalayim. There are 3 things that Rav Yochanan said in the name of those who are the men of Yerushalayim. You're better off being of the final platoons of the war instead of the earlier platoons of the war. So that when the war is over, that you will be able to get back to your city first. I don't know how this plays out. We know the famous story of David and Bathsheba. We'll see a little bit more about David and Bathsheba tonight, that he sent out Uriah to the front lines. So that's not so pasha. Like, how does all of this work out? That's why the Gemara that says that Kol HaOmer Shedavid Chata, it's very difficult Gemaras, because you put Uriah in the front lines, it's more dangerous. Is the Gemara here saying that it's about danger? Is it just saying about strategy? So tough Gemara to understand. And as well, he said, something that we learned about yesterday in regards, or 2 days ago, or I can't remember anymore. Yeah, that was last night. I say Shabbat, what? Yesterday. I said that was Rabbi Akiva. I say Shabbat, but even then we said you have to make kasa dahar, so that's some type of fish. And continues the Anshe Yerushalayim that you should do business with people who are having a good stretch, that they're in a good stride. Shlosh, what? Yeah, also a repeat. The language was a little different, but it's very close. Yeah. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says in the name of the men of Yerushalayim, Altar beganos, or some say begagos, mishum ma'aseh shahayim, because of the story of David and Bathsheba. So he saw Bathsheba If it was ganos, that's where she was bathing. He was standing on the roof and saw her bathing in her yard, but because he was from an elevated place, he was able to see more, and he shouldn't have been able to see her, and that led to all the dominoes that then felt very complicated. So al tarbe beganos, either a reference to her, or begagos, a reference to him, mishum ma'aser shehaya. Bitcha, Bagra, Shachrer, Avdecha, V'tenla. If one's daughter reaches Bagros, which is 12 and a half years from the time she reaches Bas Mitzvah, so that's the ideal time, or it was at that time, the ideal time for a girl to marry at the age of 12. And if she got to 12 and a half, she was a Bogera. So then the halacha was Shachrer, Avdecha, V'tenla. So then the halacha is that if a person has an Eved Ivri, they should free the slave and then allow that slave to marry her. And that would be the appropriate big shaila in the Rishonim here is how does that work? It's an Isser D'Oraisa to be Meshachar your Eved. Okay, the Rishonim go through. What?
We talking about Hebrew or Canaan?
How can it be a Kanani? I don't know. I didn't know.
That's what the Isser is. This is on the other Canaan.
I don't know. Okay, then it must be. But how does that work then? It's to a gerus.
It's like it's going to Medicare. Which I never. What?
Like an exaggeration. It's nothing to do with saying even. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be that as well. Could just be that. But I know that some of the Rishonim were bothered by the Metzias of being Meshachar or Eved. Okay. And one should be careful with his wife as it relates to their first son-in-law. What does that mean? So says the Gemara, what does that mean? My time, machlokes. Rav Chizda Amar mishum erba, we're afraid of something inappropriate happening. Rav Kahana Amar mishum mamon, he says that we're afraid that in order to make the daughter happy, to make her daughter happy, the wife is going to spend a lot of money on the new son-in-law to make sure that he's happy, so that her daughter is happy. And says the Gemara, haveha isnu, both of them are valid concerns. Let's continue. We are almost at the bottom of the page, 6-7 lines from the bottom. Amar of Yochanan Shlosha minocha leha olam haba. There are three. It just says three groups, three people, three ideas. Minoch le'olam haba, from those who will inherit the next world. Eluhain hadar be'eretz Yisrael. One who lives in Eretz Yisrael will be minoch leha olam haba. We know from elsewhere in Shas that a person should try to live in Eretz Yisrael. If they have a halachic reason to not live here, or whatever, logistics, business, whatever, there are reasons to live outside of Eretz Yisrael. But if one does live there, then they are minoch leha olam haba. Amagadol banav l'talmud Torah. People who raise their children to study Torah. I would imagine this doesn't only mean day school. It also means day school, but it means on top of that to give our children a sense of the geschmack of what you're all doing right now, of leaving your homes and being koveitim. Your kids know that you're not there. They know you're not there, and that's itself a message. People who make havdalah on wine on Motzei Shabbos. Mahi, what is this last one? Says the Gemara, that if a person leaves over wine from Kiddush for the sake of havdalah, the Rishonim here explained that there was just a limited amount of wine, and because there was a limited amount of wine, you thought about it to make sure that the havdalah was done appropriately. Amar Rav Yochanan Shlosha machriz alein HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chol yom. There are three that HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks positively upon them every day. Al ravak hadar bikrach ve'eno chote. A ravak is a single man, someone who's not yet married, and he lives in a city. Ve'eno chote, and he doesn't do anything inappropriate. Ve'al ani hamachzir aveda leve'aleha. You have a poor person who, even though they're so poor and they found a lost item, but because halachically they were obligated to do a Shavas Aveda, it's a harder mitzvah for them because they don't have a lot of belongings. So they found, let's say, a wallet that had $10,000 in it, but it had someone's name on it. So that's not right. You should be doing a Shavas Aveda because there's siman in there. It's pashat that doesn't belong to you. So that's another one. And the third one is Ve'al Ashir Hame'aser Peirosa Bitzina, a person who's very wealthy who does meiser in a private setting. These are the kinds of people that are being referenced here. So Rav Safra, Ravak Hadar B'Krachava. Rav Safra was one of those kinds of people. He was a single person, a single man. He lived in the city, and l'chora, he wasn't chote. So says the Gemara, Tani Tana Kame de Rava Rav Safra. This brisa was taught in front of Rava and Rav Safra, and Rav Safra was thrilled. So Abu Panav, the Rav Safra is like, Givaldaka, that's me. I'm a single guy. I'm not yet married, and I'm not chote. So Rava pulls out the carpet from under him. Amar lo Rava, sorry, this doesn't apply to you. Lav kigon mar. This doesn't apply to you, but rather it applies to the following more extreme scenario. Ela kigon Rav Chanina Veravoshia. Dahabu ushkefi be'ara. They were shoe repairmen in Eretz Israel, in Eretz Israel. Vabu Yasve Beshuka de Zonos, and their office, their little shop was in a place where the Zonos, where all of the Zonos were sitting, all the prostitutes were. That was where their shop was. They were even making shoes for them for their own livelihood. The ailu lahu, and these women would enter their shop, not dressed modestly. Inhu mistakle behu. The women would look at the men. The inhu lo madlanenahu istakle behu. But Rabbi Chanin and Ravoshia, they kept their head down the whole time. So those are the people about whom the Gemara was saying that if you're a ravak, if you're a bachelor, if you're not yet married, and you don't violate any of theirs, it applies in that. That's already a very complicated scenario. It's Yosef Atzadik. It's every day. It's constant exposure. So a couple of things that are very important is we have to understand first the natural psychology is that we should not put ourselves in that scenario because that's a tough scenario. Second of all, if you are in that scenario, very difficult to succeed. That's what the Gemara is implying here. That's Yosef HaTzadik. That's why Yosef got the Tzadik title, because he was exposed to Eshes Potiphar on the regular, and we have to make sure to avoid scenarios that are complicated like that. In fact, these women were so impressed with them that whenever they would say, I promise in the name of, they would do it in honor of these Rabbanim. And when they would make a neder, they would say it in the following way, B'chayehen Rabbanan Kadishe Deva'ara Israel. These holy rabbis, I promise in the name of the holy rabbis, these guys, Rav Oshia and Rav Chanina, they were taken by the amazing mindset that the person, as my Rebbe gave this to me as Eitzah in regards to education, teaching women, never make any references to anything physical about them, even the most innocuous of things, new glasses, nothing, don't talk, nothing. No physical references whatsoever. And it's like another geder that keeps, and that's like, this is the extreme version of that. And it's a beautiful idea just to keep the appropriate boundaries. It says the Gemara, Shlosha Kodesh Baruch Hu Ohavan. There are three people that a Kodesh Baruch Hu loves. Mish'enu koes, mish'enu nishtaker, mish'enu mamid amidosav. Someone who doesn't ever get angry. Someone who does not get drunk, minus the halachic times where it's appropriate to drink. Someone who is not makbid on their own midos, they are a little bit, they're gamish, they're able to kind of go with the flow a little bit. Shlosha Kodesh Baruch Hu sonan, there are three that a Kodesh Baruch Hu hates. Someone who is a hypocrite, they say X and they do Y, and it's not by accident, that's their profile. A person who knows edus about his friend, and he does not testify. And someone who does see their friend do something that's inappropriate, promiscuous, it's not right, something that they should not have done, and you know about it, but you're made as a yachid. That's also, you're not allowed to be made as a yachid. That's a pasuk in Chumash. You're not allowed to be made as a yachid because that's just called either motzi shem or lashon hara, depending on whether or not it's true. It's not allowed to be done. Kiha de Tuvia, there was a story of a man named Tuvia. One person named Zigud came to give testimony, and they came into the Bezdin, and they said in front of Rav Papa, one guy, Zigud, by himself said, I saw that Tuvia did something wrong. So it says the Gemara, Nagde le Zigud. The guy who came in to give testimony, he got lashes, he got malchus, he did something wrong. So Amar Le, Zigud said to Rav Papa, Tuvia chata v'Zigud min gad. I came in here to tell you that somebody else made a mistake. Why am I the one getting the punishment? Amar Le, because you violated a pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk says, Lo yakum eid echad beish. That's us, sir. You're not allowed to give testimony as one person. Your testimony is invalid as one person, and now all you've done is speak negatively about another person. So that's aser. And you're all by yourself. So shame Rabbi Alma, come up kisbei. All you did was slander the guy. That's not helpful. You didn't do anything, right? Yes, of course. Gimel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sonan, there are three that HaKadosh Baruch Hu hates him. And it should be the case that you should give edus. But if you're the only one there, you got to shut your mouth. You're not allowed to talk about it. That's lashon hara. You're not allowed to do that. It says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav mutter lisanoso. In a case like this, it's mutter to have sina, to have hatred toward this person. Not the person per se, but to the ma'aseh that the person did. That's an important ha'ara, that when we say that there's a heter for sina, it doesn't mean sina outright that you're a terrible person. It means we try to separate out the individual from what they did. And so we have to see what all of this means. We're going to learn a little bit more about this now. We know, of course, if you see the donkey of your the donkey of your enemy, and it's being crushed by the burden. So we said that you should certainly help him. So says the Gemara as follows. My sone, who is the person who you hate? Ilema sone nachri. If you want to say that we're talking about someone who's a sone nachri, you're talking about someone who is a non-Jew, and that's the person you hate. That can't be it. V'hatanya sone shamru sone Yisrael. Because the Brisa writes on this pasuk that this pasuk is not talking about hating a goy; it's talking about hating a yid. So says the Gemara, "Sone she'amru sone Yisrael velo sone nachri." Alapshita, it must therefore be that it's a sone Yisrael. Says the Gemara, you're allowed to hate a Jew. Umi sharia lemisne, a person's allowed to hate a yid. How can that be? The Torah writes, we know, of course, that the Torah writes that you're not allowed to hate another Jew. It's mamish and isur d'oraisa. It's a big problem. So that we have to make sure that we mitigate. People who are different than we are, people who have different ashkafas than we are, people who have different views on life than we are, we don't have to hate them. We can hate the idea, we can dislike the idea, we can agree to disagree. But mamish sina, that's a pasuk in Chumash. That's lo sisna zechicha bilvavecha. The Ibn Ezra by the Sar Sadibros is bothered by this idea of the Torah controlling our emotions. How does the Torah get to determine how we feel? So the Ibn Ezra gives a beautiful answer by Lo Sachmod. He's like your ashkafa is wrong. You thought that by Lo Sachmod that man's wife was shaykh to you. That's your problem in the head. There's something wrong with you. Think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't give you what you needed. That's your problem. And if your ashkafas were right, then you would not have desired that woman. Same is true over here. If you had your head on straight, you would not hate these people unless halacha warranted that you'd hate these people. So that's so that's what the Gemara says. And let's continue. We're almost halfway down. Here we can see that this person did an isur d'oraisa. So if the person did an isur d'oraisa, then you're allowed to hate them. Says the Gemara, well, if that's true, then we're all in big trouble because we've all done a lot of averos. Kule alma nami misne sanile. If that's the case, you should be able to hate everyone. Maishnahai. What is going on with this? That just by this case you're allowed to have seen about. Obviously, you can't hate every Jew in the world because they've done an avera, and we've all unfortunately done averos. Hopefully, we've done tshuva for them. But pashat that we've done averos. Helalav ki haygavna. We're specifically talking to this case. Techazya be ihu dvar erva. So the Rishonim say that there's something unique about erva. When a person does an inappropriate act of intimacy, he knows. It's like you might need hasra in a formal way, like in the halachic process, you might need a formal warning before you get malchus. But everybody knows that it's not right. Everybody knows instinctively, minus halachically, we know instinctively that that's not right. If you're in a monogamous relationship, you're not allowed, we understand, it's like so pashut. So that's why the Gemara says there you're allowed to have sina. A fascinating idea. That's why some of the Rishonim explain this Gemara. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak adds, Amar mitzvah lisano. So not just mutter lisano, it's a mitzvah saseh shel Torah. Shene'emar yiras Hashem sonasra. That the way that we fear Hashem is by showing a yira, is by showing a sina, of that which is rav, that which is not allowed. So that's a mitzvah. And then asks the Gemara, Tzushto, how do we take this a step further? Amar Ravacha bred the Rava the Ravashi mal the memra le Rabbe the Misnei. Let's say that I know a friend, my friend does something inappropriate. Am I supposed to tell my friend's Rebbe? Is that Lashon Hara? Because if there's a mitzvah for Sina, then I want the Rebbe to be able to fulfill a mitzvah. It's an unbelievable idea. Because why isn't it Lashon Hara? Well, the answer is that it's a mitzvah d'oraisa. You're enabling a mitzvah d'oraisa of Sina, of hating. Again, this all sounds very backwards, but this is the question of the Gemara. Is it appropriate to tell the person who violated the Isra, is it appropriate to tell his Rebbe? So Amar Le, Ravashi responds as follows. If the Rebbe of your friend knows you well, and he trusts you as he would, any to aid him, then lemale, then taka, you should. V'ilo, lo lemale. But if you don't have his ear, if you don't have a connection with him where he knows to trust you, then there's no value in saying anything because he's not gonna believe you. So then you should just keep quiet. Tanu Rabbanan, there are three, Rabbi Salas, Shlosha Chayin Einam Chayim. There are three whose lives are considered to not be lives even though they're alive. Harachmanim, v'haraschanim, v'anine hadas. People who have a lot of rachmanos. What does that mean? Rachmanim and Gomei Chasad, that's a Jewish trait. So the Mefarshim here explain that we're talking about someone who is just over the top of a Rachaman. Every moment, you can't put aside the feelings of others. You're so swallowed by what other therapists have a responsibility to lock the key at night. You come home from work, you can't bring everybody's sorrows home with you. You can't. You should be empathetic. You should be sympathetic. You should try to help. But you can't be buried by everyone's problems. It'll overtake you. So Rachmanim is to a degree. The Raschanim, people who can't control their anger. V'anine adas, people who are very particular. Amar Rav Yosef, if that's true, says Rav Yosef, I'm a disaster. Kulhu isnahu vi. I am all three of them. I'm a Rahman. I can't separate my feelings from other people's. I'm a Raschan. I get angry sometimes. And I'm a Nine Adas. I'm a very particular person. Another example of three, Tanu Rabbanan Shlosha Sonim Zeh, there are three that hate each other. Elu Hein HaKlavim V'Tarnagolim V'Chabarim. The dogs hate each other, and some roosters hate each other, and Chabarim are either Persians or people who live near Persia in the outskirts of the cities there, one of the two. Some say that it's even true that Zonos hate each other, the competition for work. That the types of hatred that you would see in Bavel between Talmidei Chachamim, just the biting, was very, very powerful. A little bit more, and then we'll stop. We have a couple minutes left. Tanu Rabbanan Shlosho Habim Zeh. There are three that love each other. Eluhein Hagerim Va'avadim V'Orvim. Gerim, it's there are no atheists in a foxhole. They're in a small group. So people who are Gerim, they always feel a certain bond, a certain common denominator. Avadim as well, a small group. V'Orvim, who would have ever thought that crows they feel close to one another. Arba Ein Hadas Sovaltan, and there are four that the mind cannot even tolerate. Hadas Sovaltan, we can't even tolerate them. Eluhein Dal Geya. You have a person who's a dal, who's destitute, and he carries himself like this regal king. You know everybody knows he's destitute because he asks for handouts all the time. So a dal geya, the brain doesn't sit well on the brain. Asher mekachesh, you have a person who's very wealthy, and he always says, no, I don't know any money here, I don't know any money there. They shut down all their pledges. The zakein menaif, you have a person who is an older person, but usually we assume that as a person gets older, they get a better grasp on their desires. However, a zaken who is minai, if you have an older person who's already doing things that are inappropriate, so that's already something that the brain can't handle. Uparnas miskal tzibor bechinam, and you have a person who is asserting power over the tzibor bechinam without any particular reason. And some say a person who divorces his wife once and then remarries her again. So the Gemara says, why is that last one? V'yesh omrim. Why didn't the Tanakama say it? Why was it a v'yesh omrim? Says the Gemara, the Tanakama, why didn't he say that? So answers the Gemara, the reason why the Tanakama didn't include the case about divorce is because Zimna de Ksuva Samaruba, maybe the Ksuba is such a tall order, they instead of paying the bill, they try to figure out their marriage. That's one possibility. Inami yeshla banim hemena, or they have practical reasons to stay together. They have children, and it's difficult, of course, on the family, and it's difficult on the children. V'lo matzi megarish, he's not able to divorce her. So this brisa goes by 3 and then 4, and now we're up to 5. So the 3 that we spoke about were 3 Ohav, and the 4 were the people that we couldn't handle. Here's the 5. Chamisha dvarim tziva Canaan is banav. Canaan gave his son the following instructions. Yes, ehevu zeh es zeh, you should love each other, but everything else is bad. The ehevu es hagezel, you should love stealing. The ehevu es hazima, you should love inappropriate relationships. The sinu es adonechem, and you should hate your masters. Ve'al tadabru emes, and you should be just pathological liars. Here's the shisha. Shisha dvarim ne'emarim besus. There are 6 things that are said about a horse. Oives haznus, they're inappropriate animals. Oives hamilchama, they love war. V'rucho gasa, they're ba'alei gai. V'omois hashena, they don't sleep so much. V'ochel harbe, they eat a lot of food. Umotzi kima, and they barely go to the bathroom. They barely defecate. V'yesh omrim af mevakesh laharog ba'ala b'milchama. Some say that they even try to kill their bailim. They try to kill their owners during wartime. Last section for the night, Shiva menudin l'shamayim. There are 7 who are going to be benidui. Eluheim, Yehudi she'ein lo isha. If there's a person who decidedly says that they are not going to get married, they remain single without a valid reason, without the effort. V'sheyesh lo isha ve'ein lo banim. A person who has a wife, but they categorically try to not have children. This causes a lot of problems for sure. We also know the Gemara in Shabbos, it says it's one of the questions that's asked by the Olam HaEmes. And when a person reaches the pearly gates, one of the questions the Kadosh Baruch Hu asked was asakta b'pirya v'rivya. But if a couple is specifically trying not to have children, that's going to be very difficult. And here as well, that's going to be very difficult. They're going to be put into a tough category. Let's say that you have children, but you don't raise them to keep Torah. Someone who doesn't wear tefillin on their head and tefillin on their arm, and they don't wear tzitzis on a 4-cornered garment. Your homes don't have a mezuzah. When you're in public, you should not walk around without shoes on. If you're not even hanging out with the right crowd, then that alone is going to be problematic. We're going to stop right here with Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana. We'll pick up Emir Hashem tomorrow night with Daf Kuf Yud Daled, starting all the way at the bottom of the page. Wishing you all a beautiful day.
To hang out with you.
See you then.
Okay.